As part of the demo, I'll be covering CI/CD for both Cloudhub and on-premise deployments. I'll be starting off with the CI/CD process for Cloudhub. What we have here is a simple API to be deployed on Cloudhub. Our main objective here is to minimize the pom.xml changes required specific to the CI/CD process. This can be a real deal breaker in ongoing projects, as CI/CD would be introduced when the project is ongoing, and it can cause overhead if a lot of API specific configurations are required in the pom.xml file. So in this pom.xml, it lists down the dependencies which are required by the API and the repositories from where it can download those dependencies. For the CI/CD process in particular, these two repositories would be required, and it can be added to all the pom.xml files irrespective of where the API is getting deployed, be it on-prem or Cloudhub. So in Azure Devops, this is the repository structure for our projects: that deleted APIs, CI/CD. So this is the Cloudhub API which we are interested in deploying. So going to pipelines. Firstly, let me show the library where the settings.xml file and the credentials files are listed. So we can also go ahead and create variable groups here, listing down the keys for the specific environments. So under secure files, we have the settings.xml file here and credentials file. Only the person who has uploaded the file has the rights to view this. So this accounts for the security in the Azure DevOps. Okay. Let's move on to creating a CI pipeline. Yeah. Our source here is TFS. We need to map the project path. Continue. Azure DevOps provides a list of templates which we can automatically make use of, but as part of our demo, I'll be starting off with an empty job. So under the CI pipeline, we need to first specify the agent specification. So ours would be Ubuntu. We need to mention the name of the pipeline. So it is going to be demo. Before we forget, let's trigger the continuous integration and again specify which TFS path should trigger the build. So this is the API we are interested in. So going back to task. Our first task would be to download the secure file. In our case, the settings.xml file. So we'll be mentioning it here, and we need to provide an output name by which we can reference it. So this is going to be my name. The next task would be adding a bash script. It's going to be an inline script, a one-liner command, a maven command to specify the clean and packaging by listing down our security file, which is our settings.xml. And the final task would be to publish this artifact. So we'll be publishing the pipeline artifact. We need to mention a name. So let's give it the same name as the pipeline. Let's save it. Okay, so this concludes the CI part of the pipeline. Now we are going to releases to create the CD part. New release pipeline. Empty job again. So let's give it the same name as the CI. So we need to specify here the artifact. So it is going to be Cloudhub demo, and we are interested in picking the latest one. So here, this is the trigger button to enable continuous deployment. So I'll be enabling it. And the next step would be to specify the deployment for dev environment. So let's keep the stage as dev. Again, the agent specification should be Ubuntu. So here again, the first step would be to download the secure file. This time it is going to be the credentials file, which would contain the connected app details for an outsider to connect to the Anypoint platform. And the next step would be to configure the bash for the deployment. So it's going to be in line again. And before we go about pasting it here, I would like to show the cd command here. So it is a simple bash script. So firstly, we are printing some comment lines here. And the next step would be to go about and install npm. And once npm is installed, we are going to install Anypoint CLI. So once Anypoint CLI is installed, we need to create the appropriate home directories and move the credentials file inside the home directory. And we are exporting a profile to make use of the connected app profile. So for the fresh deployment, this is going to be the Anypoint CLI command. It is a deploy command where we would be specifying the runtime, the workers involved, the worker size, the properties. So in my case, it is going to be mule.env as the property, and another property where I'm specifying the deployment target and another user property. Finally, the application name and the jar file path. So I'm verifying here if the above command is successful, which means the deployment has succeeded. I'm giving it a rest before I go about describing the API with the application name. So if this command is a failure, it means the fresh deployment has failed. So we are running the CLI command using modify, which would trigger the redeployment. For the redeployment, we'll have to specify the environment. In our case, it is going to be dev. And again, we will go about specifying the runtime, workers, worker size, the respective properties involved, and the application name and the jar file path. So once again, we would be checking for the success scenario here. It is mentioned redeployment has succeeded, and we'll go about describing the artifact. So I'll quickly copy this, paste it here. Since we have a lot of variables, we will have to create them. The runtime is going to be 4.3.0. Workers, let's say 1. Worker size Let's make it 0.1. Environment we are interested in, dev. User property, size, application name, dev proc TFS API, and finally the application jar file path. Saving it here. So going back to the release, so we do not have a release yet. Let's quickly verify if we have everything correct. So we have triggered the continuous deployment trigger, and if you need to set any approvers, here is the place where you would set the approver. So after the release is created, you can mention pre-deployment approvals. You can simply enable it and mention the user or the email ID rather of the user. He needs to belong to Azure DevOps first, and you can specify the timeout, like how many days it can hold valid. So let's disable these for now. Likewise, you can specify the post deployment conditions here as well. So under post deployment, you can go about specifying auto redeployment trigger, where you can say deployment to the stage fails. You can say redeploy the last successful deployment. So this is a good rollover strategy. So I'm disabling it again. Okay, I think we are all good. Yeah, no runs yet. So let's trigger it by making a change and committing it. I'm not gonna make a huge change. I'm just gonna delete this line to trigger the build. I'm gonna say updated pom.xml check-in. Going back to the pipeline. So you can see here that the CI part is being triggered. And this is where you will look at the logs. Let's give it some time for it to complete. So as you can see, the CI part is complete and it says one artifact is produced. So this would show us the jar file path where the artifact is being placed, and this is the path which I specified there in the variables. Going to release. So you can see that the release has been triggered and it is performing the steps for the deployment. Let's wait for a while for it to complete. So you can see here that the bash has executed, the fresh deployment has started. So going to any point platform. So it is trying to deploy it to Cloudhub. It's gonna take some time. So looking at the log. So we can see now that the API is successfully started. So this concludes our on-prem So this concludes our Cloudhub deployment.